harder the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles body, opening,
do it. Love of the game. Love of the
Battle
game.
buddies.
Battle
Read.
buddies.
Reading is fun.
I didn't have to do shit for this episode.
How does it feel?
It's awesome.
Yeah, I bet you feel good to sit back and relax.
But then I also had like the anxiety, like, oh no, I didn't prepare.
I didn't do shit for the Iliad. I watched some of that Troy show on Netflix, and I was like, Kevin's version's better. And then what else did I do to prepare for the Iliad? That's not true. I listened to some of Stephen Fry's. I got into it.
You got into it.
And yeah, honestly, you, sir, your Iliad series, if you're listening to this, welcome to Battle Buddies.
Welcome to Battle Buddies.
Yeah, welcome. We're getting ancient 2025, the year of ancient history for us, it feels like so far.
I'm Kevin. This is Spencer.
Yes.
And we cover modern and historic battles for the everyman.
For the everyman, welcome to the year 2025. This is our first episode of 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the masses?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, welcome. I was partially inspired by this because of our previous series, the Iliad, which Kevin basically crushed. So I kind of want to tell the listener, if you have not listened to that series before listening to this, you might want to do that. I feel like there's going to be some topics and ideas that we bring up that kind of are inexorably intertwined.
Ooh.
With
that sounded fancy. I like that.
I stole it from somewhere. I don't remember where I stole it, but I did steal it.
It insists upon itself.
Yeah. So, listener, if you're here, you know, I am typically, Kevin and I like to, we've in the past done scripts, and I read off that script, but you are going to be listening to 0231 Intelligence Analyst Spencer today.
I like this.
This is going to be, I have a couple of notes jotted down over here, and we're going to be going off the brain.
Yep. But before we go into that.
Yeah, dude.
I got a really important question. This came up.
Oh, God.
I've had a lot of holiday conversations with family. This is just based on one conversation that I had, and I wanted to bring up to you that I have our punk band's new name, our make-believe punk band that we're going to start one day, and it's going to be called Pubic Hair on the Golf Course.
I don't like it.
Pubic Hair on the Golf Course. That's punk, though, because you don't like it.
Can I have a counter idea?
Okay.
Docile Dude.
Docile Dude's good.
And our first EP is called, well, you can't have a first EP.
Can't have first EP.
LP is going to be called Arched Eyebrows and Shrugged Shoulders. Lots of math rock involved. Docile Dude. Pubic hairs on the what now?
On the golf course.
This might be like... Yeah, that's
that was just based on a conversation that I heard from relatives. Anyway, so here's my actual question. Should you trust the medical advice of a cafeteria worker at a hospital more than a food service worker at, say, a Subway?
The question is more than?
Yeah, should you trust his medical advice more than the other guy?
Should
you?
No.
No?
No.
What if he says, and this is a quote from my grandma, looking at Bromed? He called it Bromed. If you just want to get rid of your lactose intolerance, bro. This is my grandma. My grandma's like 80-something years old and had a knee replacement. You just drink Greek yogurt for 30 days. I'm going to tell you the first week sucks.
Okay, so I owe you an apology because I thought that this was some stupid Kevin weird joke that this is reality.
This is real.
Kevin sends me an audio clip last night.
No context.
And I was like, I said, babe, Kevin might be having a real good time after eating some like cake or something. I thought you were like hyper. And I hear kids in the background. I was just like, hey! And he finishes with like, I was like, what kind of joke is this? only to come to find out that it's actually reality.
No, so we're at the dinner table, and my mom finishes the story about my grandma, and I said, "Everyone, hold on! I have to send Spencer this note before I forget."
So wait, was my answer correct? No, you should not.
I don't think you should. But it's interesting, right?
Why are we undermining the cafeteria lady or someone at a Subway? Why are we undermining that person?
Those are the two interesting points that we bring up, right? Going serious for a second, we do talk on the show a lot about positional authority. I'm obsessed with positional authority.
I know.
Because in education, it's all over the place.
Massive.
And in war, it kind of is too. If you're just a rank 1 lieutenant, but you're in the shit at the right time, you are acting as a colonel, essentially.
Facts.
And so this guy has some positional authority, right? Like, he has potentially an ear, and that ear, unfortunately, might be my grandma's. And, like, I don't want my grandma with a new knee to have bathroom issues because this guy is trying to teach her how to get rid of lactose intolerance through Bromed.
Yeah, that's a new term I had not heard yet.
Me either.
Yeah.
I hope it's real. I hope that this isn't... No. I hope it's not real. I hope it's this one guy's crazy thing that he came up with. It's like my old manager at the movie theater who was obsessed with numerology and always had a little notebook where he was numerologing.
Is he a projection? Was he in the projection room a lot?
I used to let him up there so we can go get high on the roof. And then he would come back and tell me what my name meant in numerology. I'm like, I don't care. Just stay out of my hair.
If you are a youngster out there in the world and you have not gotten your first job yet, a movie theater is not the worst choice.
It's not the worst choice.
You get free movies, like that's fun, and it feels like minimum wage.
You learn a lot about people.
You do. And
the people that work at movie theaters.
You're a janitor who gets free movies.
Yep.
That's it. But this actually is going to be a good segue.
Sure. I'm wondering how you're going to segue this.
I like it.
Yeah.
No, you've actually teed me up quite nicely here. It matters who tells the story when you hear it told.
Whoa! Shit! That's so good.
Am I wrong?
No, it's perfect.
If I heard this story that you're talking about from your grandmother, I might be hearing a different story, correct?
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of a huge theme that I would like for us, the listener, for you to think about today. Megiddo is known as the Battle of Megiddo, 1479. I have to unfortunately be specific because there's so many battles here. As you looked on this archaeological site, you are witnessing like 35 battlegrounds there, at least. So it's insane. And so one of the things that we're going to be going over today in true Battle Buddies fashion is the first ever recorded battle.
Cool.
Ever.
Just ever.
As far as evidence is concerned.
Yeah.
But it's not the first ever battle, obviously. That would be two Neolithic dudes throwing stones at each other.
I was like, yeah, it'd be that. I was listening to... You listen to the new Dan Carlin one?
No.
This interview? Oh, about these different like African peoples. And she was talking about early conflicts and like, no, early conflicts are between like Neanderthals and the other... And like the breeding out of other subgenres of people and races, and it's complicated.
It's the first sport. That's why I am deeply fascinated with wrestling and grappling and jiu-jitsu and all that. It's like, this is the first. This is how humans were like, I have to fight this person. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what I want people to think about. Who is telling the story? And I think it is apt to mention at this time, there is the Battle of Megiddo is mentioned twice. It's two different separate battles in the Old Testament.
Oh, interesting.
And I want the listener to know, some background on me, I grew up in a religious household. And when you're like, oh, it was a religious household, you guys went to church on Sunday? No, like, we went to church,
right.
Had family meetings, prayed in the evening, went to youth group Wednesdays, went to Bible camp over the summer. Like, no, I was forced very much from childhood to go to church.
Because like in the South, everybody's like, yeah, that's what it means to be religious. But in California, you do have to put that disclaimer out there.
Thank you, partner. That's why we do this together.
Yes,
I appreciate you for saying that. That's exactly correct. And it's important for the listener to know that you're hearing this story today from somebody who experienced that growing up.
So how close did you get growing up? Backing up. I watched The Righteous Gemstones.
Great show.
Adored it.
Great show.
And they had the strong man for Christ.
Yeah.
And they like would rip the Bibles and stuff. Not the Bibles, but what they rip books, phone books and stuff, and they do all the strongman things. And I thought I was like, is this a bridge too far? And then I went and was talking to my coworker who's from Texas, and we were both like the Righteous Gemstone. I was like, yeah, but I had to like suspend my disbelief a little bit for this. And she died. And she's like, no.
That's reality.
They used to come to our public schools.
Yeah, so nothing like that.
Okay.
I never experienced anything like that. I'll be honest, like the churches that I grew up going to were very just into reading
Like
the
more
Bible.
serious, yeah.
It was all biblical oriented. And then if it wasn't, our poor family would go around Fairfield trying to find a new church. And we went from church to church.
Oh, interesting.
My father was ostracized because of some of his behaviors and perspectives on the Bible. He liked to get into like scientific debates at church. And I don't know if the average listener doesn't know, like getting in scientific debates at church is not the place to do it.
Right. That's academia.
Correct.
Yeah.
So my father would approach church in an academic fashion.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily well. I hope today it is these days welcomed. I imagine. I think it is shifting. This guy Wes Huff was on Joe Rogan recently. He's our age. He has a doctorate in theology. He knows his shit, and he's making it really like digestible. And his whole thing is like absolutely challenge it. That's what we should be doing. We should be challenging all of this.
On the academia side, yeah.
Yeah.
As an adult, I've had no problems reading through many arguments from
both sides.
Yeah. But
awesome.
I remember as a kid, and this is a very limited perspective, and I don't mean to throw shade or anything, but I very much want an answer. I still would like an answer about the universe. It keeps me up at night. And like where it comes from, how eternity works. And
small questions.
Just that one question. And I remember I was allowed to go with my buddy to Sunday school. And then I went there and I started asking about what was before God as soon as I got a chance to.
Questions.
And
yeah.
they're like, and they took it at first. They're like, yeah, so there was nothing. I was like, but what about before him? And like
Right.
they wouldn't articulate it differently. They didn't try to I didn't feel, even at the time, and I was just a little kid, but I didn't feel like they were trying to validate that perspective and like what I was trying to get at. I wasn't trying to challenge their doctrine, but I learned.
Well, this is a future teacher on their hands.
As an adult now, I'm seeing that they felt anxiety about it because they saw it as a challenge to their authority in that room.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know the answer or how to explain it.
Yeah.
Like, it was lame though. As a kid, I was like, I thought this was it. I thought this had the answer.
Yeah. So.
And then when they all took communion, I wasn't allowed to take communion. I was like, fuck you guys.
Whoa, what church is that?
It was like Catholic one.
That's absurd. I guess you do have to go through catechism for that.
Yeah. But I was just like, I'm the only one in this giant ass room that's not allowed to do this. And it was like a thing.
How inclusive.
I was like, I don't like having attention drawn to me like this.
Religion's tricky.
It is tricky. Retrospect, as an adult, I see it differently. But as a kid, I was like, interesting.
It's just one of those things where as we study, Kevin now and I now are rapidly approaching 3 years of studying war. And, religion was at some point going to come up more often than not. And here we are.
Most governments are theocracies in the ancient world.
I say all of that to basically say this battle specifically that we are going to be mentioning today predates that of the Old Testament stories. I'm not talking about Genesis, obviously, but the Battle of Megiddo that is mentioned in the Book of Judges and again in the Book of Kings is not what we're going to be talking about today. I'll be talking about aspects of it briefly, but that's not the battle we're talking about. We're talking about hundreds of years before that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't want that to deter someone from thinking that this negates the relevancy of it because it's not mentioned in the Bible. The Battle of Megiddo, there's multiple Battle of Megiddos in the Bible.
Right.
But it's a sentence.
Right.
So I can't really cover that.
Yeah.
So, as we go forward, just know that you are listening to a Battle Buddy. This is the Battle Buddy's interpretation of the first recorded battle in history. And I want us to first, before we get into specific characters and stories, I want Kevin and I just to simply look at this beautiful imagery intelligence we have here, imint, as they say, and I want us to think about the idea of a choke point. So what we have here, Megiddo, this city atop a mountain.
And listeners, we're a video format as well. So if you want to open up your phone, you can look at this picture with us.
I'm going to try to be as descriptive as possible with my words in case you're listening on iTunes. But yes, if you have Spotify, feel free to pop that thing open. This is a city on top of a mountain. That's literally what the word means, right? So Har Megiddo is where it comes from in the book of Revelation in chapter 16, verses 16. It said something like there will be a war on the top of the Hebrew word called Har Megiddo, which translates to Megiddo on top of a hill. And that is essentially where we have gotten the word Armageddon. Har Megiddo is where we got the word Armageddon. And so it makes sense. And again, this is going to hurt people's feelings. It makes sense that the writer at the time, whomever wrote the book of Revelation, which is theorized to be John, would have absolutely known that Megiddo would have been a place like likely to have had the world ending. This is high real estate. Like just the geographically speaking, this place is crazy. As you can see, it's on top of a mountain, right?
Yeah, there's so much farmland near it.
So it's a massive choke point. Okay, I want us to think about that just objectively before we get into narratives and stories. It's a insane trade route. This is one of the biggest trade routes going through the Near East and the Levant at the time.
Okay.
And where we are in modern day, for the listener, this is like northern modern day Israel.
Okay.
It's absolutely still a place that you can go visit today. These surrounding greenery areas are the kibbutz, which is essentially like what we would compare in the United States to Quakers in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's just a bunch of Jewish folks living their Jewish ways, tending to the land. So, massive trade route.
It makes sense as a trade route. You know, it looks like you got about 50 to 75 miles out. You're going to have that mountain range. So, you're in the middle of this valley.
Yeah.
Very flat.
Yes.
So this would be obviously where people would try to form their trade lines. Thank you, Civilization. I'm learning a lot about this.
Yes. Yes, Civ 6. Yeah, we're going to get into that too. Trust me, when we get into chariots, I'm going to talk about Civ 6 specifically. So if you look at this, we're on top of a hill. What does that also mean? That means that if you are on top of this hill, you have the high ground. Not to quote Star Wars, but right?
He was not wrong.
When you have the high ground, you have what? The advantage, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. Right, but it's also, again, it's an interesting dichotomy because although you have the high ground, it's also a choke point. You can you can see where it is. It's one main spot. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It could be besieged, right? Like that's the whole thing.
Yes, and guess what? We're gonna get into it.
Well, I'm realizing that this is because the word we talked about sieges at the beginning of the Iliad, and we talked about how the first siege is where the word Armageddon comes from. This is all related here.
See, it's all coming full circle.
Whoa, bro med.
Now, culturally, 15th century before Common Era. Let's talk about culturally what's going on in Megiddo, dude. This is let me paint a picture for you.
Yep.
This is honestly, this is like the Fairfield, this is like the Bay Area of the fucking Near East. Highly diverse. Highly diverse. We have what is called Canaan. Okay, now those out there, the biblical readers, your interpretation of Canaan is going to be a little bit different than the way that we are going to be talking about Canaan today.
Oh, because of son of Cain stuff?
So Canaan is an umbrella. Canaan, think of Canaan city-states are just a bunch. You got like the Hittites, the Assyrians, all these fall under the umbrella of Canaan. So when I say Canaan, think of like Gaul, right? Where that's really an umbrella of like a lot of different people. And so that's why I'm saying this is culturally the Bay Area of or the Bay Area of the Levant, or the Fairfield, California of the Levant. It's just a very diverse area. You got a lot of different cultures weaving in and out of there, and eventually people are gonna, post up, right?
Sure.
And
there's also 600 or 700 years before Homer's writing. So this is before the sea people come,
right? For
the Bronze Age collapse.
Dude, that's a real thing.
Which means that in the western side of this stuff, this is the height of them for hundreds of years, which means that they're probably trading a lot with these folks too.
Yes.
There's a lot. This is more geopolitics than I think we give credit for, because we're, in our modern sense, we're not used to how much we used to fall as civilizations.
Beautiful.
And that this is close to a peak right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a great way to put this. And so it's important to know that, like, the Canaanites that the Old Testament referred to. So our Western brains, when I say Canaanite, you are going to immediately think that they're evil.
Sure.
The Old Testament perceives these Canaanites as being idolatrous. They have multiple gods. Okay.
Adam raised a Cain. Adam raised a Cain.
So they have multiple gods. They do fucked up shit. In the Bible.
Sure.
They're like, throwing babies and murdering folks, and these are fucked up people in the Bible.
Yep.
Now, it's important from my perspective as somebody who studies military history. If somebody came up to me, dude, and I'm a Canaanite, and they're like, "Our God said this is technically our land," I'm like, "Oh, cool, dude, mine too."
Yeah.
This is my so. Just, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying there's a question mark there for me.
All right, let's go through that bluff.
All right. Bottom line up front is something that we use in the intelligence world, and I kind of want to bring it back here just so that people can get the idea up front so we know what to listen for. The Egyptians fought this Battle of Megiddo to gain control of the trade route and secure northern borders against future potential threats. And they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely will, okay? But I just want you guys to know that before we get into a story where it's like very much skewed towards one side.
Sure.
It's important. So we have the Egyptians versus the Canaanite city-states. And the Egyptians, their military technology, this is where, in my opinion, they're going to really win, is with their amount of chariots.
Okay.
And their type of chariots. And I'm going to concisely explain it when the opportunity arises. And they also have bronze weapons.
Yep.
These are huge. So just keep that in mind. Canaanite coalition city-states are also going to have chariots, but they're going to be all over the place because remember, this is like a trading community. So they're not going to have your mass Egyptian exact same chariot type of thing going on.
Like regulars.
Yeah, and also, with the studying this battle made me realize that I actually really appreciate. This is going to be a good moment for us to like stop and talk about Motor T. Like there are guys for all these chariots, their entire job was to have a chariot where they just had spare parts so that they could fix these chariots. Sure. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So pretty crazy.
Well, something we should mention probably, and I don't know much about this exact battle, but just in general, people are not riding horses at this time. They are not sitting on their horses like we think of.
That's huge.
This is not cowboys and Indians stuff.
No.
This is chariots.
The world of the wheel.
Yeah, you draw your chariot with a horse.
Yep.
And that is how they thought you used horses. It didn't make sense to do it any other way.
Yep. And so for anybody who's dealt with modern technology or building something from IKEA, dude, if you have something that has a huge grip and you have these clamps on these axles and wheels and they are bumping over a long period of time, they're going to fall apart.
Yep.
So the Egyptians were able to figure out that you get animal fat and you lube up animal fat like it's WD-40. Yeah. And they were able to get these certain type of clamps that gave just a little bit of wiggle room so that they were able to pivot their wheels. And it made them last way longer. Yeah. And you'll see when we get into it, but the Egyptians cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
A lot. In a short amount of time. And at first I was like, damn, that's crazy. But then you get to learn about, World War II and how far Hitler traveled with his troops. Yeah. And like, holy shit. So I guess you really can cover a lot of ground if you have wheels. Like, it's possible.
Yep.
Right on. So the idea here is Egypt wants to siege Canaan and fortify a wall. And their tactics, they use like siege and starve tactics.
Yeah.
I have different theories about this that we're going to get to because as you can see, you look at the lushness surrounding them. And the idea from historians and archaeologists is that they destroyed it. And I was like, coming from someone in the military, they probably just consumed it.
Right.
I don't think they would destroy it. I think they would use it for their own.
So that's a huge debate when we talk about like Dark Age stuff too. If you're listening to Dan Carlin's like Thor's Angels and Twilight of the Aeneid and stuff like that, or the Aesir, sorry. We think that they just destroy all these like Greek and Roman, all these Roman architecture stuff, all the Europeans. And then there's other people that are coming out and like, no, they just used it around them. Like it was just nice material, building material. Exactly. And so then they just used that building material.
I think I'm apt to lean this way.
Yes.
I do think that there are assholes that come along. Who was it? Was it Alexander the Great that came through Afghanistan and destroyed everything? There was like a particular ruler who came through certain areas, was like, fucking scorch earth. And it's like, you're douchey.
Yes.
You're not even trying to win this stuff. You're literally just trying to put a sentence in a history book.
Right.
So going forward, I want us to think about symbols. This has become a massive symbol in today's world, this trade route that now is a city of Megiddo that is mainly referenced in the book of Revelation now. There are fundamentalists out there that believe that legitimately this is where the world is going to end. I implore you to read the actual translate, the most like Greek translation of it, and you'll realize that he's just making a reference to prior battles here.
Right.
Again, this is your Battle Buddies interpretation.
Yep,
I'm sorry, this is going to probably hurt some people's feelings. For those wondering, I'm actively reading the Bible. I'm not trying to disparage the Bible. I'm trying to interpret an author's message.
Yeah.
So, for those who are wondering why I'm trying to say, like, this is a symbol, like, this is a symbol of massive logistics. This is also something that I want us to think about that we've been coining here at Battle Buddies called dispositional convenience. When I was in Afghanistan as a young man trying to figure out why we were there, I came up with the idea that Afghanistan, for those who don't know, is located right between Iran and China. So if you have America going and posting up 56,000 troops in Japan and then 35,000 troops in Germany, still to this day, in theory, in the future, you would have troops posted up in Afghanistan right in between China and Iran.
Right.
Again, a geography thing, okay? Same kind of deal with Megiddo at the time. It was a really huge balance of power. And for those who are like, oh man, what would be like the modern day version of this? The South China Sea.
Right.
There's a lot of cell phones going through there. Megiddo is the modern day, South China Sea is the modern day Megiddo. What is some more symbolisms of trade routes and trade things? The World Trade Center,
right?
9/11, right? Like let's implode this idea of trade. So I just want people to view this as like massive symbolism.
So if I'm thinking about this with our Battle Buddies language, the strategy is a control strategy from Egypt. The Canaans. Are the Canaans the one besieging?
So we're about to get there.
Okay.
We're about to, yeah.
But we have one group who is seeking to control the trade routes and disrupt the economics long term.
Both.
Right. By sieging. So that's a control. So it's a slower strategy.
Yes.
And their tactics to destroy the trade routes and destabilize this economy are going to be what we discuss in this battle itself.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into our main character right now, Tutmos III, who is a pharaoh, and he straight up said his words were, to capture Megiddo would be to capture 1,000 cities.
Got it. Okay.
So now it's time for, let's go with context now.
Yep.
Now it's time for context. We're going to get to our main character, our main storyteller. Okay, I had to start this episode off by thinking about who's telling the story, and right now, if you go to Egypt at the Temple of Karnak, you will find this story written on the walls from Tutmos III. So Tutmos III, toot toot. Thutmose III was pharaoh in 1490 BCE at the ripe age of 10 years old.
Classic. I love it.
Can you imagine, what were you into at 10 years old? Like Power Rangers?
Yep.
Right?
Pretty heavy into my
like
Legos.
Pokemon's getting pretty big.
Pokemon.
And then boom, you are
Transformers.
now the leader of the United States of America at 10 years old. Now, obviously back in the day, everyone knew that a 10-year-old can't run the show. So the person who did run the show, while we sat around and waited for him to become of age, was his stepmom, Hatshepsut. That's a name.
Yep. Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut. Right?
Sput.
So she does her thing, and she's not our main storyteller today. So bye, Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut does her thing, and now it is time for Thutmose to become a man and to become the ruler. And this dude, the first thing that he does is he starts building.
Sure.
Building. He is, one might say, a real estate mogul.
Okay.
And he loves being the host of a reality TV show.
I was saying, let's see how this goes. You have a golden shitter.
Very orange. Are we seeing the obnoxious parallel?
Are we seeing?
Okay.
I love to go toot.
So Thutmose is at an interesting time. He brings up his reign, okay? And he is like, I'm new, I'm building things, and I also need to get on some campaigns. And by campaigns, I mean military campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And what did we learn from our entire series? If you haven't listened, go listen to it, on Gaul and Julius Caesar. Campaigns is what brings you honor.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
This is the name of the game.
Right of conquest.
Right of conquest.
It's not. I was trying to explain this to my 8th graders last week because we're going over World War II and the Nazis to start a Holocaust unit. And every year we struggle with it because it's so easy to paint all of the invaders of World War I and pre-World War I as villains. And I'm like, that's not wrong by a modern lens, but it's also not right in understanding their context because I don't want you to see World War I Germany the same as Nazi Germany. They could not be more different.
Important distinction.
In terms of like their political backing and their social backing. Like, the World War I, should they have stopped way earlier as soon as they saw how this war was going to go? Absolutely. Once you realize what's going to happen and how long these battles are, terrible. But right of conquest has some stupid validity to it because the logic is there. I don't agree with the logic, but it is logic. If you can't protect yourself from me, then how are you going to protect yourself from other invaders?
If you are raised in a culture where you are surrounded by your peers and the people that came before you, and they are solidified in gold and stone, surrounding you with all these incredible, mythic, godlike stories, you think that your job is to be like, I think I'm just going to sit back.
Right.
Like, it's part of you. You have to go out. You have to conquest. This is the job that you've been made at the time.
What are the Greeks called? Arete?
Arete.
Yeah, you're God-given.
God-given. Yep. And as we know, pharaohs were obviously seen as godlike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All of our fun occult books.
So, pretty cool shit. We did not know the strategy of Thutmose III and what he was going to do with everything until 1823, when an Italian archaeologist, he might be Italian, I might be messing that up, Champollion, maybe that's French. He read the hieroglyphics. He was able to read the hieroglyphics. So
he's the guy who invented champagne.
He popped it after he read these hieroglyphics, and everyone was like, "Damn, bro, best celebration drink ever."
So was he able to translate it because he found the Rosetta Stone?
He was able to translate it because he studied this shit to the point where he was able to bring context to the whole thing. He's like, "This is clearly what this means." He was the guy.
Okay.
But the point of the matter is that it took hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, for us to be able to figure out what
it's
the fuck
crazy.
was going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
And this is dope for me personally because I love writing and I was in the military. But the person who we know the person who transcribed this story.
Cool.
And the person who transcribed the story was a dude by the name of Janeni, and it was a massive role at the time. A person who would follow the king around and write down your story is, one, you have to be educated, extremely educated. You have to be extremely responsible, trustworthy, all these different things to be. And let's be honest, you have to be a good liar.
Oh yeah, Alexander the Great had a whole he had a whole propaganda team behind him. That's why we know so much about the Nazis too, is their whole propaganda campaign that would follow them. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely a thing.
We do the same thing. Everybody does it. You have to do it.
Yes.
Dune is hilarious because they just get mad about how good or bad their propaganda is. It's great.
Yeah.
Duke Leto, who's your favorite character in the first book, and you're like, he's so good, and even he's like, our propaganda's too good at this.
Dude, counterintelligence, bro.
Yeah.
Those guys, one of the coolest things was when we made Taliban propaganda, false Taliban propaganda.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so dope.
The only problem with propaganda stuff is when it doesn't work. Well, I mean, besides all the horrible things that happen from it when it's successful. But, okay, maybe on the sillier side. A sillier side of propaganda is when it doesn't work. So, like, before the English started using their RAF to bomb in Germany, they were shooting out leaflets. Right. So before, like, America got involved and stuff. And there's, like, a report that all they did was supply the Nazis with 2 years worth of toilet paper because of how ineffective it was. It's just hilarious.
So, Tutmos is new.
Toot.
And here's what we need to think about. It's information, though it was not being spread to people's cell phones, it was still spreading.
Yeah, absolutely.
News spread.
We talked about that with the Caesars campaign, and they, you think about it, farmers shouting to farmers, to travelers, and how many people are traveling. You can travel so fast.
100%. So, the news that this Pharaoh Hatshepsut was on her way out and this new kid was on the rise, the Canaanite city-states would have absolutely 100% knew that.
Okay.
So, what do they do during this transfer of power?
Yep.
They try to rebel.
Sure. That's the time to do it.
Egypt is technically in control of this Canaanite city-states. They had all these different agreements with Hatshepsut, like, all right, here's your taxes for this trade route, right? It's a boring Star Wars Episode 1 thing about trade routes, right?
Right.
And now that there's a new pharaoh, the Canaanite city-states are like, fuck that, dude. Let's fucking take this opportunity to seize a weak pharaoh who's new at this and doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. So this Canaanite rebellion, who's like, we're gonna control, we're gonna stick it to the man, and we're gonna control our own sovereignty within Megiddo in this trade route because fuck Egypt, fuck the brass, right? So the Canaanite rebellion assemble at Megiddo. And the Canaanite include folks from modern day, just to give you guys a visual here, modern day Iraq, Iran, Syria, Turkey, right? So these are places that if you think about in modern day history, we're not going to be doing a lot of digging. There's actively and will be for quite some time, probably within our lifetime, wars happening on and off in these regions for a long time.
And so geographically, if I'm understanding, so I was looking at a map trying to make sure I'm understanding this right. So if the heartland is in Egypt, so like northeast Africa, and then you go up through, the Red Sea, and then what we're talking about, like the West Bank-ish area.
Yeah, Gaza and all that.
And so this would be the extreme limit of Egypt's influence, right? So this would make sense that they would be rebelling because this is far. You'd have to get people through the top tip of the North Sea.
Calling this Egypt is ridiculous.
Right. Saying that Egypt has total control of this.
Yes.
And we talked about this when we did 300 and the Persian.
It's the South China Sea, bro.
It
is
I get
the
it.
South China Sea.
So just for those wanting a visual about the map, right, we have Tut, who's in Egypt, northeast Africa, and then going northeast. Just keep going northeast until you're pretty much gone. And then you have a little satellite that's technically like a trade hub that is affiliated and was conquered probably a generation before by Egypt on one of their campaigns.
Yes.
And so now they're like, oh, it's a change of power. Like, now is the time. We are on the finger. Okay.
Kevin explained it beautifully.
Okay.
You
did good. I was just trying to make sure I understood.
No, I appreciate hearing from you that I'm explaining this properly. So, estimation is about 10,000 to 15,000 troops for the Canaanite rebellion. There's, as we look over here, we got about 10,000 to 15,000 folks holding up here.
Damn.
Okay. Now, you say damn, historians are all like, that's not a lot.
No, for an ancient battle, it's
they're
pretty
not.
small.
That's not a lot.
Yeah.
Which,
Agreed.
if we're going by numbers, most things get inflated over time because this was written down so long ago. It's pretty accurate. And we're going to get, I'm going to literally read, dude, we got into this with the Romans. We got into this. We get into this all the time. Numbers matter.
Yes.
They write these things down. There was Romans who would come in and be like, there's 5 sergeants left. There's 6 of these left. So they were constantly writing these down, and we still have the written account of the spoils of what the Egyptians got from this war, which I will literally read to you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, the Egyptians are going to be relatively same amount. So there's 10,000 to 15,000. The Egyptians might have 5,000
Yeah,
more.
maybe.
Might.
Because it would be hard to get, that's what I'm saying. The distance, the army moves by its belly. So you have to have supply lines that are secured the whole way. And you're talking, that gets tricky.
It does. It does.
Especially if you want to do something like a siege. You're going to have a small force.
So, as Kevin was saying, Tutmos, right, is coming from like Africa area, right? So he assembles a fortress on the eastern delta on the border of Egypt.
Cool.
He marches, they 144 miles to Gaza in 10 days. That was absurd to me.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and
you can do it.
You can do it, and what it says to me as somebody, again, who's just been reading military history for this long, it means that the Egyptians loved mobility.
Yep.
And the chariot thing was huge for them.
Mobility has always been the way to win a battle.
Civ 6, bro.
Yeah, dude. If you're fast.
So if you guys, the military tree on Civ 6, I was playing, if you have a Netflix account, you can play like the new Civ 6.
I know you can play Civ 6 for free. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And one of the military wheels or trees on the chariots, you get to go to light chariots and all these different chariots, right? And there's some legitimate validity to this.
Yes.
And so the Egyptians, whatever their chariots were, I don't know if they had good mechanics or whatever the case may be, or just legitimate amounts of extra parts, but their mobility was insane. 144 miles in 10 days.
That's actually not that bad.
It's not. So it's very feasible.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is what I was saying. In my mind, I was saying it was crazy. And then, I'm watching these documentaries about all the ground that's covered in North Africa in World War II by the British when they're trying to secure these supply lines. Like, if we lose the Suez Canal, we lose everything. Same exact thing here.
It's actually pretty slow.
Yeah.
For a fort, like it wasn't I would say my non-historian, non-military historian.
So you said it's slow?
I think it's slow.
So check it out.
I think it's not a forced march because I've read so many of these marches. I think they're faster.
So Kevin, we're showing I love this. So Kevin is showing his studies here. They continue north more, but they cover less ground for another 10 days. Okay. What does this mean? It means that he's on a campaign to he's capturing more cities.
Yeah, as he's going. He's making sure that every trade hub is actually following what they're supposed to be doing. Yes, absolutely.
That's the Battle Buddies interpretation. I can't tell you for certain, but I can tell you from reading far too many pieces of literature on how military campaigns maneuver, in ancient and modern. Yep. And I'm telling you, this dude was on a mission and he was seizing whatever got in his way. He's like, we're already here.
Well, and it shows me too that this rebellion that he's going to squash is not that big of a concern right now. Like, because it doesn't sound like a forced march. A forced march, you can do over 20 miles a day. Even guys, because not all the guys are going to be in chariots, right? So they're going to be walking. The problem with forced marches, if you've played any military strategy games or war game at all, is when you force march, your horses are ruined and your men are ruined, right? So Alexander the Great always dealt with this because he could force march. His troops would force march like crazy because he would lead and do it. That's how Philip II did it. That's how he did it.
Yeah, there was that, there's the crazy story. the monolithic story of somebody came to Alexander the Great and gave him water and he pours it out on the ground, right? To prove to his troops, like, I can do this. It's fine. We're good.
So, but he always dealt with, potentially having tired ass guys going into battle. And so this keeps your troops fresh, which means that time they were stressed, they were setting up a campaign, but it doesn't sound like it was something they had to squash right now. And then I think the other thing is, like you said, I think they wanted to make sure. My worry would be, if I was his leader, is I would go out real fast, stop them, and then not have a way back. Like not securing my back route.
Oh, that is
because if all those trade routes are potential rebellions, which they are, they're always potential rebellions.
Yes, well, they are.
Yes, they're all like it's happening. They're always being conquered or reconquering, and so
it's the Fairfield, California.
Yeah, so
I'm trying to tell you, bro.
Sassoon is going to be lose its cityship.
Yes.
Okay.
So we finally, after all this pillaging in Battle Buddies theory, they finally rest at a city called Yehem.
Okay.
I don't know if it's Yemen, but in the time it's called Yehem.
Okay.
All right. Now this is where shit gets fun. This is where shit gets fucking Frank Herbert.
Yeah, I love this.
So now we're posted up, and now it is time for the Egyptian Council of War to get together and talk about how we're going to do this. Okay?
So Tut seems pretty legit. He's listening to generals and stuff?
Oh, Tutmos III is absolutely legit.
Okay.
Absolutely legit.
Like, do we agree with killing a bunch of people? No, obviously not. Ancient battles. But
this pharaoh is compared to that of Napoleon.
Okay. Yeah,
absolutely.
I see it.
Has more campaigns than Napoleon.
Interesting.
100%.
Okay.
This is one of the most insane pharaohs of all time that you've never heard of.
And he didn't go into Russia in the winter.
He did not go into Russia in the winter.
Bitch.
No. Yes.
Fuck you, Napoleon.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck you, Halsey.
So they want to discuss their best way into Megiddo. Again, let's look at this, right? This is a city on a mountain. There's a lot of ways we can go about this, right?
Yeah, scaling the mountain's tricky.
Bro. And there's a lot of different passages to get to said mountain.
Yeah, shout out to the content creator, I think it's Tactical Forge on Instagram. He does, with miniatures, lots of different tactical things like approachings. And he talks about, I've watched a few of his videos multiple times on going up mountains, like how to take a mountain or like a hill. And it's very complicated.
You sent me, this dude's legit.
He's so good because he talks about how when you're scaling a mountain, you can't actually have your shadow go over the mountain, because if your shadow goes over the mountain, then people can see you better. So you have to stack. Like, there's way more to it than I thought about, like charging up a mountain and taking it.
100%. It's very difficult, which is why they say that if you have the high ground, you obviously have the advantage, right?
Yes.
So the War Council is here to discuss basically three options.
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to go over these three options. We have these different options are called Tanakh, which is just the name of a pass.
Okay.
Jefti and Aruna. The names are irrelevant. I just want to name them because it's just important. Okay. The Tanakh episode is it's a curvature wing where you would be able to approach Megiddo coming from the southeast. Okay. It's a curvature wing that you would just kind of flank from the southeast.
Like a big L.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The other option would be come through Jefti, which would be the northwest. You could do a wing and flank them from the northwest. So even more layman terms, we can either flank them from the left in this passage, or we can flank them from the right in this passage. Or
you said from the northwest?
Yes, so you would basically have to do a march.
Pass it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You'd have to go loop all the way around.
So,
which they could do because they have chariots.
Yeah, okay.
They could do it.
It's pretty heavily fortified on the south end. That's where they're assuming that they would attack them. So now they're trying to find.
We can't see it in these pictures, but there would be cover going through these passages.
Got it.
There's huge what they call, and a lot of my Afghanistan veterans are going to know this word, wadis. Okay, a wadi would essentially be very wide creek beds. Sometimes wet, sometimes not.
We're talking like Civil War fighting here with that kind of stuff. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the last option, the third option, okay, so we can we're either going to come from the left or we're going to come from the right through these passages, or we can go right up the middle.
Okay.
We're calling this the Aruna, right through the center passageway. Okay. Now, this would obviously, we're going to get through it, but this would be like that. This exposes the Megiddo as a choke point more so. You are making yourself a choke point, right? And Tutmos III, he feels obviously he's the new pharaoh, right? And he's talking to the war council, and he has to plead his case, right? He's got to talk to the war council, and he's got to tell them which route he wants to go. And he's also talking about, remember, these are rebellious Canaanite city-states. So he also has to give justification for his actions. So he says to the war council, that wretched enemy of Kadesh. Kadesh is just a city within Canaan.
Okay.
Kadesh has come and has entered into Megiddo. He is there at this moment. He has gathered to him the princes of every foreign country which has been loyal to Egypt, as well as those as far as Naharan and Matani, them of Haru, them of Kode, their horses, their armies, and their people. For he says, so it is reported, I shall wait here in Megiddo to fight against his majesty, the Pharaoh Tutmos III. Will you tell me what is in his heart? And so essentially, Tutmos is like, these motherfuckers don't like us.
Yeah.
They don't like us. So let's go to war. Let's do it, right? And all of the war council is sitting around figuring out which idea they should do the most. And Tutmos III says, I want to go straight through. I want to go straight through the. I don't want to go through the left. I don't want to go through the right. I want to go right up the passage.
So it sounds like the two flanks, they're all slightly control based, right? Because we're talking about potentially sieging. The two flank ones are more control tempo-y because they're looking to slowly do this and whittle it down, but pretty heavy into the control. But that one, the one that he's choosing, is very aggressive. Like,
yeah, because and remember, I think initially here, and it's not specified, I don't think the initial idea is to siege.
That's what it makes me sound like. So it sounds like, you can't really siege aggressively. You siege.
That's the long game.
Yeah.
That's the podcasting game.
Okay.
So
the siege of the podcast.
You like that? So the war council thinks that going up the middle is stupid. And so they say, we have some intelligence on this matter. And so the war council says, what is it like to go on this road which becomes so narrow? It is reported that the foe is there, waiting on the outside while they are there, becoming more numerous. Will not Horus have to go after Horus and the army and the people similarly? Will the vanguard of us be fighting while the rear guard is waiting here in Aruna, unable to fight? Now 2 other roads are here. One of the roads, behold, it is to the east of us. That is to come out of Tanakh. That's to the left that we're talking about. The other, behold, it is to the north side of Jephti, and will come out to the north of Megiddo. That's what the other one we're talking about. Let our victorious Lord proceed on one of those roads which is satisfactory to his heart, but do not make us go on the difficult road down the center. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that they have intelligence of prior battles.
Yep.
So though this is the first recorded battle of Megiddo, they already know for a fact that armies have gone through this narrow passageway. And he's like, what have we been told? That people are on the side just hammering us as we funnel out of this narrow passageway. And so, by the way, this narrow passageway, it gets down to 13 feet.
Dang.
So you got, think about it, like this crazy long army that have to get down to, that's maybe 3 people abreast.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Talking about one chariot for sure.
Right. And you might have to disassemble some chariots to get, it's going to be a whole thing. And so Tutmos makes the executive decision, and he's basically like, everything that you guys are saying right now, this is actually really smart. But he's like, you guys having this idea to go on the left flank and the right flank, The Canaanites are having that exact same conversation. So he's like, I'm going to take the gamble that they think that we're afraid to go down the center route. And he famously says, I will proceed down the Aruna road.
Yep.
I will proceed down the center road. Famously. So they make the squeeze, dude, down the center. An army 14 miles long and getting as, short as 13 feet wide. And I kind of want us to like pause and sit here and just think about like the Halseys of the world.
Yep.
And that like this is one of those moments where me personally, after we've been covering battles, I kind of want to start a new series called Warlords, where we talk about just these military battle geniuses. And it seems like a unifying example of good leadership is gambling.
Oh, yeah, it's all gambling, right? It's gambits. That's
gambits, right?
It's a gambit. It's a romantic ideal. Because it's not quantifiable, right? You have to, when you do a gambit in chess, like if I did, I don't know, like the King's Gambit, the most romantic way to play it, I'm assuming that they are not going to expect me to attack so fast. And that then, after I start it, that I'm expecting them not to think I'm going to then suddenly trade away pieces as quickly as I am. And then I'm expecting them not to be familiar with how weird the board looks.
It's a beautiful example.
Yeah, so it's
a perfect example.
And I do feel like they do that. I think it's interesting for us to think about how we rate them. Like, are they rated just on their success or the intelligence of the gambit?
And this is something that I think that our podcast should explore. And I mean, spoiler alert, that's kind of the route. I want to do some of those routes this year. I'd love that.
Because Halsey, we can spoil it. Halsey was a bad idea and it didn't work.
Dude, go listen to the Battle of Lady Gulf series.
Fuck you, Halsey.
One of the
you
best.
killed a bunch of Americans. He did.
Yeah, Halsey sucks ass. But yeah, crazy. I just wanted us to pause and think about how crazy it is that these leaders make these intense gambles. And we were talking about it recently with the likes of Jimmy Carter, where it was like, you and I think one of the things that we admire from leaders is intellect.
Yep.
I think that's fair to say. And it's very, one of the things that is obvious is that Jimmy Carter is not a dum-dum.
Right.
He's just not. He was a nuclear engineer in the Navy. Like, he's a very, very smart guy. But that doesn't mean that he fucked up.
Right.
And there was blood on his hands.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so there's this very that's fascinating on a human level to me.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd like to explore it more. So, on that note, Tutmos III was correct.
Yeah.
The Canaanite cities-states were expecting them and ready for them on the Tanakh and the Jefti roads, those different passages. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So they come out of this center pass free, right? And now that choke point, the Megiddo now turns into the choke point. They're not coming out of this choke point, right? They're now able to turn Megiddo into a choke point because that's the interesting thing about this geography. You can either use it as a choke point, or you become the choke point.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So Egypt's army funnels out and they try to encircle Megiddo. And if you look at Megiddo, right, it was at the time, there was walls and it was surrounded by a bustling amount of business. Think Mos Eisley in Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what was the Egyptian army doing on their way up to Megiddo? Pillaging.
Yep.
And so what do they get distracted doing while they're trying to siege the city? Pillaging.
Yep.
And so what does Megiddo do while they're watching all these Egyptians lose their military manner and they're stealing and pillaging? That gives Megiddo enough time to close the gates and fortify.
Shout out to the things we've talked about before for context, because that's a great point. These armies a lot of times are not paid, right? Money's based on spoils. That's the whole Iliad thing, right? It's about the spoils of war and Briseis being a spoil of war, which is the complicated part for modern readers. But him not paying Achilles, the greatest warrior, causes the whole Iliad to happen. Caesar if you remember one of his battles, he says that if I catch any of you pillaging before the end, then I will kill you. And that happened in the Iliad too. If you strip armor off during the bigger fights, the ones that they were afraid of losing, they said, if I see you stripping armor off, I'm going to kill you. Meaning, they always strip armor off. They always stop and pillage.
Don't steal from my stealing.
And if you are doing an aggressive strategy, the danger, what I'm realizing, and I never thought about this until just now, the danger of an ancient aggressive campaign or tactic is stopping your army from pillaging because it slows you the fuck down.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of feel bad for Tut Tut here. Do we know if Tut... I have a question for you. Do we know where Tut Tut is in position with his... Like, is he with the army? Because some of those Egyptian pharaohs did go out. You know, you were expected to see your king.
This is a great question that would need to be answered in the after action episode.
Okay, because there's no way to know right now based on just the reading.
I don't think so, dude.
Yeah.
I don't think it went down like that. I think because I don't think he's leading from the front.
It's just interesting because ancient war, we've talked about it, the thing that we want in modern conflict is I want Trump and Biden to have to go to the lines. If we say that we need to form a line somewhere, then they better be somewhere in that line. They don't need to be in the front of it anymore. I get that. Guns are different, but they should be in the line somewhere. And ancient battles, they were expected to be somewhere, but sometimes it's not always true with the blue-bloodedness of pharaohs.
This goes back to Roman times. I'm listening to Tom Holland's Rubicon right now, and he talks about the word Senate comes from the word senexus, which literally means old people.
Yeah.
And at one point in Roman history, these senators, these old senexes, these people were like, you need to put one of your sons in the game.
Yep.
If you're going to be sitting here from these marbled staircases and being like, let's go to war, it's like, then start with your kid.
Skin in the game is a real thing.
And guess what? It's still a thing that even Michael Moore did in one of his documentaries. I don't think it was Bowling for Columbine. It was one of the 9/11 ones or whatever, where he goes up to these senators and he's like, "Oh, you guys want to go to the Iraq War? You should send your kid." But that's not a new concept.
No,
that's been since Roman times. So, yeah, interesting how politics and greed can literally change the course of an actual real-time battle.
Yeah, crazy.
So, upon this happening, obviously now the aggro that you were talking about has changed.
Yeah.
So now it's time to set up for a siege.
Yep.
So now what the Egyptians do is they encircle Megiddo and close them in.
Okay.
They fortify a wall and close them in. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out.
Yep.
And the idea here is to starve them. It is a war of attrition indeed. And here's where things get a little... We don't know if it lasted a month or 7 months.
Sure.
And one of the reasons of that is archaeologically speaking and considering the flow of this... I'll bring it up in the after action because there's a lot of really cool, interesting things, but I think it's more so for the hardcore fan and not the average listener. So... one of the interesting things is that during this siege, while the Egyptians are starving out the Canaanite city-states, a huge king in one of the city-states, Kadesh, the king of Kadesh, for those of you who see our Instagram marketing thing, there's like a random king on our Instagram post. That's essentially the king of Kadesh.
Okay.
And we don't know his name. Why? Because during the siege, he was able to sneak out at one point.
Nice.
My theory is if you are able to sneak out and then it gets overtaken, your name does not get to last through the ages.
Yeah.
You're a coward.
Yeah,
you
they don't
left.
like you. Yeah.
So that's this is the Battle Buddies interpretation.
Yep.
The king of Kadesh is a little bitch and left during the siege.
It's that rear guard in the Iliad. He's like, he sees Achilles. He's like, I'm going to fucking die if I fight that guy. I could run away. But then I would run away and literally nobody will take me in. I feel for the coward. Like
a quandary. It's a quandary indeed. And so, obviously, over time, this works.
Okay.
It insanely works. Just over time, they're able to take this city. They're able to starve them out. And again, their king left. So if your king leaves, it's essentially like you're sinking with the Titanic rather than getting out. And the spoils of war were vast after they do this siege warfare and they're able to reap the benefits.
So they successfully switched from an aggressive strategy to a control strategy. So they moved over on the triangle. And then do we know how they eventually broke the siege, or did they give up?
Canaanites said they give up.
Okay.
Essentially, like
They were just starving.
They starved.
Yeah.
They starved. And again, look what they're surrounded by.
Yep.
Agriculture. They're literally surrounded by their food.
Yep.
So if you're surrounded by watching your enemy eat your food that you worked hard to do, you're gonna crumble.
Yep. Well, and I bet they pillaged and burned a lot of that land too. 'Cause that's in civilization, that's your big strategy against sieging, because it's what we do is you burn those farmlands. But also, tut, his supply line is strong. So I bet he's also gaining resources from that supply line that he resecured.
Yep.
Only going 10 miles a day.
Because now that you have them locked in,
Yeah.
no one's getting through the Aruna Road, the Tanakh Road, or the Jefti Road.
Okay.
So he's got all that. Again, this is his first ever campaign.
Yeah.
So he's motivated
Yep.
to get this. It's a massive trade route. And so one of the interesting things from this battle that is just the reality of the situation, Kevin was just talking about the spoils of war.
Yeah.
And the spoils of this war are specific. I mean, we got 340 living prisoners, 2,041 horses, 191 foals, 6 stallions, 1 chariot worked with gold with a body of gold belonging to the enemy. They got one that belonged to the Prince of Megiddo, 189 chariots, 924 bronze coat of mail belongings to the enemy, just like 502 bows.
Damn.
Like, bro,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. And for those of you who are like, oh, that's not really important, dude, there's literally a book in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, whatever you want to call it, called Numbers.
Yeah.
What is that? It's a census.
Yep.
It's literally a census, bro. And these are words, numbers of just things that they recorded over time, measurements. So the fact that this battle happened and we're able to read the spoils of war is the most insane
thousands and
thing
thousands of years
ever. And that's where I kind of want us to like slowly close this page, is that even when you start to get into the Old Testament, when this story of Megiddo forms to a different pharaoh, this Thutmose III was able to hold this area, in theory, for somewhere between 100 and 200 years.
Okay.
It's a long time.
It is a long time.
And guess what? It doesn't fall until, in theory, the story that takes place in Judges with King Josiah and all of that. So, for those who are like, oh, this doesn't really mean, it's absolutely setting up the story to legitimize the stories that are taking place in the Old Testament.
Yep.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But anytime that I mention these things to people who actively read the Bible, they feel like I'm disparaging it. It's not. And again, I also just kind of want us to maintain that this is symbols. This is all about symbols. I have a bunch of mysteries here, but I think I'm going to keep the history mysteries for our after action. And just kind of want to end things with a little story of Allenby, General Allenby.
Okay.
And this is how we're going to wrap this up with a little bow.
That sounds great.
Okay. World War I, 1918. We have a General Allenby with the Allied forces trying to fight the Ottoman-occupied Megiddo. Okay?
Okay.
And General Allenby was a voracious reader. Read the Iliad.
Love him already.
Read
Love this dude.
Read all types of things. And so he was the type of general that when he was in places, he would read about the battles in the history.
Yes, this is the fun.
And so what he did in World War I, in recent history, read about Thutmose III saying, I will take the center road to Megiddo because the enemy is going to know that I'm going to take these easier routes. And he used these same strategies and won
Dang.
in the Battle of Megiddo of 1918, which we'll obviously get there one of these days. There's so many battles at Megiddo. I just wanted to start with the first recorded one. And so, as my boy Eric Klein likes to talk about, it's the famous saying that supposedly George Satayana said, where for those who don't know history, they are doomed to repeat it. My boy Eric Klein and those who study Megiddo would like to say, for those who study history, you are able to repeat it if you need to.
I like that.
And that's kind of where we've wrapped things up for the first recorded battle in history, dude.
I love it.
That's Megiddo.
I love that an ancient text was able to supply modern tactics. That just warms my
Isn't that your
literary
cuckles?
heart. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that was a fun little. I read way too much for the amount. How long did we record for?
An hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah, I read so much.
This is good. I love it.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, dude, I
crushed
appreciate. Thank you, dude. I hope that you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Me and Kevin have been deeply fascinated with ancient stuff and connecting it to the modern day, and are stoked to see what 2025 holds. Please email us and reach out to us if you guys want to interact with us.
Yeah, we're getting more interactions. Keep interacting. It's fun. It's fun to get to know you guys.
100%. If you see us less on Instagram, it's not because we're gone. It's because we're reading.
Yep.
It's because we're getting ready for our next episode. We have not gone anywhere. We're only trying to increase our quality.
Yep. And if you want to know about our after action reports, so this is where we talk more about like the technical side of our texts. We'll kind of go into the text themselves.
I have so much to talk about with this specific episode of After Action that I'm excited about.
Just come on over to Patreon. That's where we're doing that. If you want more, if you just like getting the general gist, like stay on this track, and that's totally fine too.
There's always more.
Yep.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you for listening. It means the world to us. And until next time,
Hoka hey!